Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quiet Light Podcast. I'm your host for today's show, Mark. You might be wondering, who is this guy? I'm actually in the introduction for the podcast. You may have heard, Mark and Joe. It's just been a while since I've hosted an episode. Joe does such a good job, and every now and then I have to jump in, host an episode, make sure that he doesn't take my name off that introduction. So happy to be doing that. And I also wanted to dip in because a few months ago, I had a conversation with Shane Hohenstein, a fellow Minnesotan here, up in my neck of the woods here, up in the Twin Cities. And Shane has been doing a lot of really cool work in the Target space, the Target marketplace, kind of the latest up and coming marketplace where everyone sees these marketplaces coming up, says it's the next Amazon killer. We're going to discuss whether or not that's even a possibility to have an Amazon killer, or if this is just a different flavor of a marketplace that we need to be taken care of. And so Shane, absolute Target marketplace expert. I'm excited to have this conversation with him, which is why I wrestled this from Joe. He actually did, Shane, just so you know, he's like, oh, he's a Target expert. I should talk to him. I said, no, Joe, this one's mine. Okay. Stop being possessive. You've dominated the podcast. People are tired of hearing from you. Actually, I'm sure you're not. Shane, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Pleasure to be here. Joe, we'll talk someday. But yeah, Mark, for the meantime, thanks so much for having me on. It's awesome.
Absolutely. Well, let's start easy here. Let's go over your background a little bit here. Just tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got into what you're doing now.
Yeah, my entire career has been in retail and retail advertising. So I started out of school at Target Corporation as a business analyst on the Target.com team, back when Target was actually hosted by Amazon's platform. So a lot has changed since then. But I left Target in the early part of 2018 to sort of have a semi-entrepreneurial experience where I got to build an agency within a distributor's company. And that was a great experience and one that taught me a lot for what I wanted to bring to my own agency. And so I launched Voyage Group full time in March of 2020. So right while the world was collapsing, but a really favorable time for e-commerce. And so today we support consumer brands across Amazon, Walmart, and Target, all the way from full service merchandising, marketing support, content creation, and managed advertising services across all three.
What a time to be starting a business, huh? As you said, as the world was collapsing, that was really uncertain. That must have been kind of terrifying at the moment.
It was. So when I left, I had the revenue to support our bills. And so that was an exciting ability to jump into entrepreneurship with a little bit less risk. But there was 24 hours of like legitimate anxiety after having multiple conversations for months with my wife to say, okay, we're going to do this thing. And then right when we did it is when March Madness was canceled and the world was sort of falling apart. And so we had this, oh crap moment, but I woke up and I was like, oh wait, people can't go to stores. People are going to go, to e-com. And so not only did we become incredibly important for the existing clients that I had in my side hustle portfolio, but, brands just came out of the woodwork needing our services. So it ended up being one of the, the silver linings to celebrate amidst the madness of the last, few years.
Yeah, and that's obviously the way it played out. I can tell you at the time, we had people that were anticipating just carnage. I had buyers that, people often think like during a recession, our business must slow down. It doesn't necessarily slow down. It slows down during change periods, right? Yeah. There are buyers looking for distressed businesses. So when we're in recession and all that, there's buyers that get excited about that. So I had buyers calling me saying, hey, once these deals are, maybe a little bit cheaper, I'm ready to go. Little did they know it was actually going to be a boon for this space and for anything e-commerce. We can now look back and say, that makes total sense.
It's 2020, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you work for Target. Kind of a locals secret here up in the Twin Cities. Everybody works for Target at some point. It's behemoth here up in the Twin Cities. So not a huge surprise that you work for them a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the marketplace in general and the evolution. I know when Amazon first opened up their FBA program, or back then it was a little bit different, right? Just open up the ability to sell on Amazon. We started promoting this as something that store owners, e-commerce business owners should do. This idea of expanding beyond just your current website and opening up different sales channels. Obviously, that completely flipped, and now everybody's going to Amazon, and it's become its own ecosystem in and of its own right, extraordinarily powerful for people to start a business. But the message that we have is still the same, and I know a lot of people in this space are the same, and that is don't put all of your eggs in one channel. Let's be multi-channel and understand that there's a lot of different things, a lot of different marketplaces to be able to sell on. Can you comment a little bit on that? I mean, do you view this the same way, especially having some experience, quite a bit of experience with Amazon there? What are your thoughts on this multi-channeled sort of approach for e-commerce business owners?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so spot on. I mean, and there's not a client that we work with on the Amazon side that hasn't had some horrendous experience with their account, listings taken down, the account issues. And so there's some natural resiliency that gets built in by being in multiple marketplaces. I think what is exciting right now, though, is that like the two that I'd say are most priority after Amazon would be Walmart and Target. And those two marketplaces make up 10% of the e-commerce space, and Amazon, while still a behemoth, is 40%. So there's a lot of opportunity to be had by going after additional marketplaces. And I think by having that and having that additional resiliency, I think it's important. Plus, each marketplace has mutually exclusive buyers that you just aren't reaching, customers that you won't reach if you're just on Amazon. And so for me, going multi-marketplace is frankly paramount. And starting with those three general merchandise marketplaces, Amazon, Walmart, and Target, are key.
Let's talk a little bit about Walmart, because I'm kind of, I don't know. I want to like it. And then I also don't want to like it because it's Walmart. And there's this sort of sense of, it's Walmart, it's cheap, right? I know a lot of people love Walmart. I'm not trying to dig on them or anything like that. What's your sense, and what have you seen? I mean, you're advising a lot of clients. What are you seeing as far as performance on Walmart? How does it differ, now, both in terms of volume and everything else, but just sort of the different mindset that you might need as you're going into a Walmart store?
Yeah, God, it is such a mixed bag. And honestly, like we have this conversation all the time through our experience of which brands make sense for Walmart and which don't. I would say any brand that's successful on Amazon has a really good shot of being successful on Target, where Walmart has such a low AOV that frankly, there's brands that we represent that just can't take off on Walmart. But if you are a value brand, or if you are just sort of category average in terms of pricing, Walmart is a massive opportunity. We see brands do between 1 and 10% of their Amazon sales. But what I like about Walmart is your cost per acquisition is much lower. There's far less competition, and it's also a rapidly growing marketplace. And so just 6 weeks ago, they made massive changes to their advertising platform that's allowing us to have brands cold start much faster and really gain market share. And so if you're not rushing to Walmart now, while all these exciting changes are happening, it's going to be where, you look at the glory days of getting on Amazon early, and then all of a sudden when people catch up, you're sort of a category leader. I feel like Walmart is sort of in that spot, but you make a good point. Like I wouldn't recommend premium brands launching on Walmart yet. It just doesn't make sense.
But we're going to talk about Target in a minute, but I want to focus a little bit more on Walmart here. Do you have a good way to test? All right. First of all, let me back up. I love the test that you're talking about, right? If you're a premium brand, if you're not competing on price, if you're a higher AOV, that totally makes sense. Walmart is known as a commodities powerhouse, right? You can buy things inexpensively at Walmart. So that sort of makes sense. If you're in that in-between territory and you're not sure if you want to just dive in, I mean, if it's only 1% or even 5% of sales, is that worth the effort that you're going to put in? Do you have recommendations on how somebody could test that out before making that big dive?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's nice about Walmart is it's an open marketplace like Amazon, right? And so they have a little bit more stringent rules for getting on the platform, but it's pretty open. My personal opinion is there's really not a lot of risk for testing your top items on there. If it doesn't work and you invest a little bit of effort, then hey, like it doesn't work, then you can always go back to Amazon. But for me, it's too low risk not to try, because the worst case scenario is you just go back off Walmart and no longer support your brand there. But there's so many reasons why it's important. One is if it works, it's going to be incremental opportunity for you. There's actually oftentimes now with WFS opportunities for enhanced profitability as long as you're selling at the same MSRP, because your acquisition costs are lower. You actually have a little bit of a profit benefit on Walmart, which sounds crazy right now. But the reality is, I always tell brands this too, is that if you're not selling your brand on Amazon, then somebody else is going to. And that's starting to happen on Walmart as well. And so for me, a brand who wants to protect their brand image, their sort of merchandising contributions, going on Walmart, if for no other reason than to make sure that you are corralling all those different resellers and making sure that your actual brand voice is coming through on your listings, for me, that's important just in itself.
That makes complete sense. Interesting stuff. Are there customers that would shop on Walmart? You mentioned this at the beginning. You teased this a little bit. Talk to me about the customers that would shop on Walmart that may not be shopping on Amazon, because I can hear some people thinking, well, I mean, I'm going to reach those customers. Amazon is so much bigger than them. Is that true, or is that not true? That the same customers will also be on Amazon?
So there's definitely overlap, but there's also a pool of customers, and I don't know the percentages, but there's a pool of customers that are exclusive to just Walmart. And they're core Walmart shoppers. So they're using Walmart for their in-store trip, and then they're going on Walmart.com, potentially not even realizing it's a marketplace, searching for their online shopping. And so for that customer that's not going on Amazon anyway, that's a huge opportunity. And while Amazon is massive, it still is 40% of the marketplace, where Walmart is almost 8%. So, for me, like, there is a lot of opportunity there. It's just making sure you have the right brand that fits.
Even saying those percentages is a little eye-opening, right? I mean, I don't think we think about it when we think about, it's not 8% of Amazon size. It's actually closer to a quarter of Amazon size at that 40-8 ratio. So fascinating.
Yeah. It's 80 billion on the, the $1 trillion, e-commerce opportunity in 2022. So it's still a massive, massive marketplace.
Just a measly $1 trillion marketplace. That's all.
Measly $1 trillion of e-commerce sales for 2022. Totally crazy.
Goodness, holy cow! All right, let's talk about the I won't say the newest entrance, but the one that we want to talk about mainly here, and that's Target. Yeah. Obviously, we're both local here to the Twin Cities. Target is headquartered here, so we love Target for a lot of reasons. I don't know about you. I grew up here, grew up with Target in the Twin Cities, but it's got a different feel, right? I mean, growing up, I remember there was the big three. There was Target, Kmart, Walmart, right? Those were the three kind of big ones, and then Target used to be kind of competing alongside them. And they made a shift. I remember when they made the shift to be kind of, we're going to sell a little bit higher end items, right? We're going to be a little bit more pricey, but it's going to be higher quality is kind of where we're going. And that's where they are today, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the value equation was not just about price for Target, right? It was about price with the products and that masstige nature of what Target wanted to offer their, what they call guests, their customers. And so, yeah, it is, your national brand products is going to be competing EDLP with Walmart, but you're going to find a lot of exclusives. You're going to find a lot of Target own brand, as well as different products within the same brand that are sort of built for that Target customer, which is a bit more upscale than Walmart, for example.
Yeah. So let's dovetail the last question I asked about Walmart into this discussion about Target. And that is the customer difference, the different pools of customers. Whereas I would imagine with Walmart and Amazon, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I would imagine the overlap is going to be fairly high there. I would also imagine with Target, you can probably get a little bit more distinction in customer base. Is that assumption correct? Or do you think it's about the same, or do you know?
Yeah, I think so. The Target customer is much more affluent than the Walmart customer, but they're also still deal seekers, right? Like if you're buying beauty at Target, there's a huge overlap between beauty at Target and Ulta, for example, which is why that marriage happened. But it's not necessarily a huge Sephora overlap or a Macy's overlap per se. So it is still premium to the mass market or to like Walmart, but you still have value brands that perform extremely well, which is why I love Target for a next step, because if you were the lowest price within your category, you're going to have a customer that's going to, want that on Target. But if you have a slightly premium or even premium product within your category, the affluent Target, guest, as they say, the customer is looking for your products as well. And that to me is super exciting. The other thing that's important to think about with Target is Target has trained their customer on which categories they're standing for. And the marketplace is exciting because they're going to expand into new categories. But if you are in, apparel and accessories, so fashion, if you are in a mom and baby sort of personal care, if you are in frequency categories, beauty and personal care, OTC, these are all categories that Target does extremely well. Toys, even electronics to some extent. they do extremely well in those categories. So if you're in that category and you're anything less than ultra premium, I mean, Target's a great marketplace to sell on.
How are they going to avoid? How is Target going to avoid becoming just another collection of everything, right? I mean, this was sort of the challenge that Amazon faced early on. Is you shop for a toothbrush and you have 1,000 vendors selling toothbrushes. So who needs that, right? And you end up getting this really, it's like the bargain bins that you find on the way out of a store. Really no way of judging the quality. What is Target doing to try and keep that sort of upscale to the mass market, as you put it?
Yeah, and that's such a good question to sort of like dive into Target's whole ethos about their marketplace. Their pride is building a quote better marketplace, and better is both for brand protection, which then leads to consumer confidence, lack of counterfeits, ensuring that you have authentic goods. And then for their suppliers, who they view as an asset to them, whether it be a marketplace seller or a first-party vendor, they want to make sure that there's protections in place for them so that way they prioritize the marketplace. So what Target does to make sure they curate the assortment as well as ensure that there's credibility there is they only have a one-to-one relationship between a supplier and a UPC. So a product that's sold on Target.com can't be sold by multiple different resellers and sellers. So there's a guaranteed authenticity, and that decision for that UPC to be tied to that vendor or that seller was actually made by a person at Target. So for any products that we bring, either as an agency or through our distribution company that we launched to allow more opportunities for smaller brands to be on Target, those decisions to list on Target.com, whether it's first-party vendor or third-party through the marketplace, is actually approved by a person on the inside of Target. And so that's how they're allowing SKU count expansion, but still making sure that there's consumer trust and making sure that they can curate that assortment so that way someone can't just come on and list 1,000 toothbrushes and hope that one sticks.
Right. So the UPC, there's only going to be one unique product being sold by one vendor, is what you're saying, right? So if I have a can of LaCroix or a case of LaCroix and I want to sell that, it's probably going to be sold by LaCroix or their authorized distributor, as opposed to 1,000 resellers. That's essentially what you're saying, right?
That's exactly right. Yep.
One of the advantages I could hear somebody saying about Amazon would be when you have multiple companies selling the same product, reselling the same product, it creates certain efficiencies in terms of pricing, right? Because how do you compete on a marketplace, especially if you're using that third-party fulfillment of Amazon that they have? How do you do that? Well, the largest one out there is going to get some pricing leverage and be able to pass that on to the consumer at the end of the day. And all the other ones will fall off. Does Target allow for that sort of optimization of that third-party seller for the consumer? In other words, as a consumer, I don't want to necessarily go to just one seller who's essentially got the monopoly on Target. Are they working on that? Is that part of their approval process? Are there guidelines or restrictions there?
One of their terms and conditions of being a marketplace seller is that they want to have price parity with competitive retailers, which essentially means Amazon and Walmart. So they don't want you to come on there, and they will actually give you a notice if they see this happening and being 10% above Amazon's retail every day. Now, Target as a retailer understands the battle that all vendors go through with resellers and the number of ways that product gets resold on Amazon, causing price pressure. So Target has no interest in participating in that. But if a brand isn't selling within a similar percentage, of that retail, they're not going to allow that seller on the marketplace. And that's the type of infrastructure that they have to make sure that their customer is also taken care of. But what is nice about it from a seller standpoint is if you know that you are undergoing efforts to get your retail price up within, Amazon and Walmart, Target's not going to contribute to continuing to pull that pricing down. So you can set your anchor there, work on the other marketplaces, and when parity is restored, Target won't be a part of that problem. And for me, that's a really nice part of being a seller on the marketplace.
It sounds much more manual of a setup process to get into the Target marketplace, right? I mean, signing up for Walmart or Amazon FBA can be done quickly, right? It's not relatively quickly. What does that process look like? And what should, if somebody's saying this, obviously, look, I don't want to compete against a bunch of other people on a marketplace. I can imagine there's a lot of people listening right now that hear this and say, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
What does that process look like? It's got to be more gated than what you see in other marketplaces.
Yeah, such a good question. And it's so paramount to Target strategy. So Target is extremely exclusive. So it's almost like selling into a buyer, right? Like you have to actually get an approval from one of the category owners to list your products. And Target is interested in expanding curated assortment, but they're not very interested in expanding partnerships and sellers. And so one of the reasons is that they actually dedicate a very hands-on onboarding process to bringing sellers on board because they want to ensure a great customer experience and they want to ensure those sellers are legit. So what ends up happening is they have a posted restriction that a new seller has to have at least 150 SKUs. And for Voyager Group, there's only a couple brands or companies that we work with that cross that threshold. And so what we have done, and which is a preferred path for Target actually in times, is we actually launched a company called Paddle Commerce, which is an affiliate company of Voyager Group, and it's our distribution entity. So we still give it the same white glove treatment that our agency does, but that seller ID allows us to aggregate across our brands. We cross that 150 SKU threshold, and then therefore we can list. And so there's sort of two ways about going about it. If you're a brand that has less than 150 SKUs, or I'd say less than 100, because we've seen them have some wiggle room on that 150 number. But if you're under 100 SKUs and you want to be on the platform, working with a preferred reseller that is in Target's network is probably your best path forward, which is why we launched Paddle Commerce. If you have more than 150 SKUs, the process starts with selling your brand in. You can't just go list. There's not a place to go on target.com and find a link to open up even a seller application. You have to know somebody or know somebody who knows somebody. And so part of the value that we provide is having those relationships, like you said, with everybody in Twin Cities having had worked for Target at some point. A lot of the value that we bring is having ex-Target team members at Voyager Group and having a lot of personal relationships there that allow us to at least vet a brand from a person that is actually making those decisions. And so once that is complete, you have to go through a rigorous 3-month onboarding process to ensure that your data quality is accurate. They have very strict guidelines. You can't just have a crappy listing live on target.com. You have to actually pass a test for every product to be listed. And a part of that means that you're using a listing tool like an Ascenda or a Channel Advisor or Scubana. And so those are all major considerations for launching Target. It's way more involved, but because of that, you get that nice exclusivity bonus.
All right. So 150 SKUs is what they're looking for, although they can bend a little bit. They wouldn't be interested in a company that might have fewer SKUs, but a really distinct, unique a set of products with IP and all that, trademarks and everything. They're going to turn away from that.
I think it's, to be honest, it's a little gray. So like, let's say Allbirds wanted to sell on target.com, hot shoe company, and they probably would cross this threshold. Let's say they've only got 50 SKUs. I don't see a world where Target says, no, you can't sell. That's a perfect category, perfect price point, perfect trend brand for the platform. So it's a little bit gray. But if you are not a very well-known brand, you're primarily an Amazon-only brand, and you want to make the case for being on target.com through the marketplace, they're going to ask you to either work with an approved reseller like Paddle Commerce, or they're going to want to make sure you have at least that 150 SKU threshold.
Fascinating. Do they care about your current revenue levels to demonstrate market adoption and appeal of the product?
They do. There's not a hard and fast rule. And when we present brands, oftentimes we'll present their sort of role within the category on competitive retailers. So we won't necessarily share revenues, but we'll say, hey, this brand is the third best brand in the category. And we can show empirical proof by sending links to their BSR on Amazon, for example. And that has made huge inroads for us to get brands that were otherwise overlooked to be considered for target.com. But because they're focusing on providing a marketplace that will lead to credibility for their customers, lead to trust when purchasing on there, a lot of what they're looking for, frankly, is just your ability to be a great marketplace seller. And so you want to have a great brand in the right categories but they want to make sure you're going to fulfill orders on time. They're going to want to make sure that you sort of know the playbook for success, which is why this strategy of having a few of these trusted distributors has been a big part of their new brand launch strategy.
Right. All right. Let's talk about the fulfillment of orders. Now, I know a lot of Amazon FBA sellers. One of the beautiful things about that is you don't need to actually touch the product right away. Obviously, as most of these companies grow, they start to, and they figure out either pre-processing centers before they send in, they maximize that sort of relationship there. But if I'm looking at a company that has 15, 20 SKUs at most, you can grow pretty big using the Amazon fulfillment network pretty successfully. What is Target.com looking at for their fulfillment? Is this all something that the merchant needs to work with the fulfillment? Do they have their own fulfillment options that they offer?
So Target does not offer any fulfillment options. If you were a first-party vendor selling into Target and you were sort of an elite product grouping, they might purchase your inventory. But on the marketplace, you're going to be doing your own fulfillment. It's all FBM. And so if you have a great operation, fantastic. Otherwise, where we steer our clients, if they're not a paddle brand that we bring in, if we're representing them as an agency, we steer them to one of our trusted partners. So we've been working with Deliver for a long time. They're a great fulfillment partner for D2C e-commerce sites. We have brands that work with Where to Go. They are a great D2C fulfillment provider. And what's nice about them is because Target requires that you use a listing tool like an Ascenda or Channel Advisor, these different warehouses already have built-in API connectors that go right into them. So then the order flow down to those warehouses works seamlessly. And that's typically what we have done, is have our partners work with one of those, because otherwise meeting Target's requirements on a consistent basis was something that they feared. Now, if you're a great D2C company and you're already doing tons of orders and order fulfillment isn't a problem, then that will work out just fine as well.
Fascinating. Let's talk a little bit about results of being on Target.com. We already said 40% for Amazon in the e-commerce space. Walmart is 8%. And I remember you kind of grouping those two together at 10%. So my basic math here would say, what, 2% for Target right now?
Yeah, 2.3% of the market is Target 22.
Do you know the growth rates on that year over year? How fast are they growing as far as a marketplace?
Yeah. So here's the deal. 2020 Target was actually like the biggest winner, but a huge chunk of that growth in their e-commerce sales was from two things. One, a really low base. And then two was from flexible fulfillment. So a lot of that volume that was reported was actually stuff that was ordered online, pick up in store, or drive-through, or same-day delivery via Shipt or direct fulfillment. But what is exciting is when you look at 2022, is Target is actually predicted to be the fastest growing general merchandise retailer. So Carvana and Chewy are expected to grow at faster rates, but then the third fastest growth site in all of the states is Target at a 22.3% growth rate. And so for me, it's like, it's an exclusive retailer, hard to get in, brand protection is there. It's not huge like Amazon, but it's still the fifth biggest site in the country. And it's the fastest growing from a rate standpoint. So for me, that gets really exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love the spin that they're putting on this as far as being far more curated than what we're seeing from every other Amazon killer, quote unquote, right? Yeah. Really hard to go head to head with Amazon, especially with their emphasis on fulfillment. They're so far ahead on that. Talk about some of your customer successes. What are they seeing when they go to Target? And we can boil it down to a simple question. Has it been worth it for them financially?
Yeah. So one thing, I don't think Target.com or Target's marketplace, Target Plus, has any intention of being an Amazon killer. Where I think Walmart is very much, they're an $80 billion e-com site. They're very much going after trying to beat Amazon, at least more so. Target is all about just using multi-channel retail to win. So the combination between stores.com, providing a curated assortment, building brand trust and credibility, that's where they're going after, is that customer experience. In terms of results, I think the thing's exciting is we've seen brands on Walmart that do 0.5% of Amazon sales because it's premium and it doesn't work. We've seen brands on Walmart on average do between 1 and 10%. What is awesome about Target is there's usually a much higher floor. So between 5 and 10% of Amazon sales we're seeing. But the thing that I think is most exciting is we're seeing the cost per acquisition be so much lower. So we use Citrus Ad for our Target product ads. Brands can use Criteo as well. But when we're sponsoring exact match keywords on Citrus, we're looking at a fraction of the expense of your cost per click on Amazon. And so the success story isn't necessarily that a brand's going to come out and see 15% of their Amazon sales and this massive growth for their brand. But if they see between 5 and 10%, it's highly incremental and more profitable because of those dynamics of cheaper acquisition costs. That's, I think, what makes it really worth the effort.
Yeah, I know, it makes complete sense. I mean, just encourage anyone to research the principle of economic rent and how it whittles away profits of any company. And Amazon is a complete live example right now with their advertising network of the principle of economic rent. Target seems like it'll be protected against that because of that, which is going to be fascinating to look at as they evolve.
And I'll be the first to admit that I look at this way too simplistically because my team does this all day, every day. But for me, if you are a successful brand or seller on Amazon, the knowledge and skill set and then incremental time to go be successful on Walmart and Target, if you have the luxury of selling on Target.com, those aren't massive incremental skill sets. There are nuances. PDPs look different, advertising, but there's a lot of shared knowledge that can be deployed. And for me, talking about is the results worth it? I think it's one of the fastest and most profitable ways to get a 10% increase in your business is to launch a profitable and exciting new marketplace.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Do you remember Jet?
Yeah. Well, I've been to the headquarters in New Jersey that say Jet on it, but it's really just Walmart's new building. Yeah.
There you go. Jet was going to be the Amazon killer. Do you remember that? I remember the big launch and everything about it, right?
And then Walmart acquired them for some insane valuation, and it hasn't done much. And not only has it not done much, I haven't seen Walmart really build any of that into their own ethos. They haven't really taken any of that secret sauce into their own business.
Yeah, I think there's like a bigger lesson here at play, right? Google used to be the search king, and no one has unseated Google as a search king other than diversifying, right? Amazon now is the number one place for e-commerce based searches. And we never thought of Amazon as a search engine, but that's where Google gets sort of fractured is in more specialized searches with specialized verticals. Well, how do you beat Amazon? You don't try and go head to head like Jet was going to do. Mm-hmm. You do what Target is doing, and like you said, it's not an Amazon killer. It's more of a niche creator and kind of a pocket that's going to be hard for Amazon. Won't be able to touch that.
And what Amazon lacks, because it is essentially just a search engine for products, is that ability to build brands and drive category browse and dwell time, right? So Target actually does that really well still. And that could change over time with new brands coming to the marketplace. But, depending on the category, I mean, half of detail page views can still come from category navigation and browse on Target.com. Where 95% or more of all detail page views comes from an ad or a search bar on Amazon. And so that's one of the things that Target has that I know Amazon, would love to have is that ability to just keep people on the site, navigating, discovering, and brands launch and leave Amazon all the time because it's just not as often as much a brand builder as Target can be. If you don't win the search bar on Amazon, you're not going to be found, where Target can allow for a little bit of that brand development.
Yeah. And make no mistake. I mean, Target is a smart company. They were doing customer analytics before it was the thing to do, right? They were doing it a long time ago with their mailers at a pretty advanced level and set the tone. Absolutely fascinating. I'm personally really excited about Target.com as a marketplace because it feels so different from what we're seeing. Like Walmart, obviously, like you said, massive company. So they're going to be able to make some headway there for sure. But I just love some of the seller protections on Target. It's super exciting.
And with Paddle Commerce, our distribution company, we have the luxury of being able to launch multiple marketplaces at the same time. So we'll be in 10 or more marketplaces by the end of this year. That company launched focusing on Target. And what I like about Target and Walmart, but primarily Target at this stage is that exclusivity and that early adoption opportunity for me is just exciting, because I think in 5 years, we'll be talking about this moment where Target sort of caught steam, and brands that got there early reaped a disproportionate value from those that will launch years from now.
Shane, this is a great segue. I'm sure there are people here that are listening to this that would love to talk to you. What's the best way to be able to reach you?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, which is voyagergroup.co. Voyager is spelt with an EUR, so VOYAGEUR.co. Or just shoot me an email, shane@voyagergroup.co. Happy to chat and share knowledge where I can.
This is a super fascinating, exciting sort of marketplace growing up. Really appreciate you taking the time to give us kind of a primer on it. I've learned a few things. Hopefully everyone listening has as well. Shane, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. And hope you have a good rest of your day.